So how do we get our kids ready for a future that's going to be run by AI? Well, for one startup, the answer didn't come from some fancy boardroom. Nope. It started right in a New York City neighborhood with a really personal mission: to build a bridge to tomorrow's world. This is the story of iVirtue.
At its heart, this whole thing is a story about a parent's fierce determination. The founder of iVirtue, she's a mom of 3, and she looked at the educational divide right in her own community and realized something had to change. In a world being totally reshaped by AI, the best opportunities, well, they don't just happen. They have to be built from the ground up, and they have to be for everybody.
So where does a mission this big even start? Well, it turns out this wasn't some sudden light bulb moment. It was actually built on years and years of work, all of which laid the foundation for a project she calls Bridging Tomorrow.
Yeah, this mission didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's been in the works for more than a decade. It kicked off way back in 2011 with an effort to bridge the digital divide with high-speed internet. Then, during the pandemic, it shifted to making all that screen time kids were having way more educational. And by 2023, it evolved into an after-school program using AI to get kids doing creative projects. You see the pattern here, right? The fight has slowly but surely moved from closing the internet access gap to closing the AI literacy gap.
Okay, so what does over a decade of this work actually lead to? It led to a concrete educational framework called iGentix-AI. You can think of it as their blueprint for teaching kids how to think in the age of AI. This quote right here, this is the guiding philosophy for the entire project. It's so important because it frames technology not as the end goal, but as just one link in a much bigger chain. You spark a kid's imagination, and that sets them on a path that leads to creativity, then to knowledge, and eventually to making a real impact in the world. It's a very human-centered way to think about tech education. Okay, so how do you actually teach something like this to, say, a 5th grader? The iGentix.ai framework breaks it all down into 3 core skills. First, you teach them to take apart big, complex ideas using something called first principles. Then, you guide them to solve problems one step at a time. That's chain of thought. And finally, you get them to think about their own thinking. That's meta-prompting, which really turns AI into a true partner in learning.
And all of this leads to the real goal, not just digital literacy, but digital fluency. And believe me, there's a huge difference. Literacy is basically knowing how to use the tech. Fluency, that's having the power to understand it, create with it, and shape the digital world around you, to go from being just a consumer to becoming a creator.
Now, having a great idea is one thing, but making it real, that takes funding, it takes validation. So this next part is all about how the Bridging Tomorrow project tried to get real-world support for its vision. So to bring this vision to life, iVirtue tried 2 different paths at once. First, they went super local. They submitted their proposal to New York City's participatory budgeting process, which is really cool. It's where residents vote directly on how public money gets spent. At the same time, they shot for national recognition by applying to the Anthem Awards for social impact. So one path was for money, the other was for validation. But you know, the path of innovation is almost never a smooth one. So now we get to that part of the story that every single startup has to face, the reality check. This is where the big vision meets some real-world obstacles. The participatory budgeting process is a massive deal in the community. We're talking about over 93,000 New Yorkers casting their votes in this cycle, deciding how to spend $30 million on everything from park renovations to school upgrades. So the results were announced. And the Bridging Tomorrow proposal, it didn't make the cut. And that was a pretty significant setback. I mean, here's a project designed for the community that wasn't chosen by the community. So you have to ask, why not? Well, looking back with a clear eye, a few key weaknesses really stand out. The plan for how to actually implement the program was seen as a bit too vague. And, this is a huge one, there was no detailed cost breakdown. If you're asking voters to spend real money, you have to show them the numbers. And finally, the partnerships with other groups weren't clearly spelled out. It was a tough lesson, for sure, but a really valuable one. This whole experience brings up a much bigger question. Is just providing the technology really the answer? Let's zoom out for a second and look at the huge systemic challenges of actually putting AI into our education system.
This gets us to a really important idea from the world of research: techno-solutionism. It's this belief that you can just throw a piece of technology, like an app or an AI, at a super complex social problem, like educational inequality, and expect it to be some kind of magic bullet. But as this experience and a lot of research shows, a tech fix by itself is almost never enough. Real change means you got to tackle the underlying social issues too. But listen, that critique doesn't mean we should just give up on technology's promise. Actually, it shows us exactly what's at stake. Because when AI is used effectively, the results can be incredible. I mean, look at this chart. It shows that students who used an AI-powered platform in China saw their performance jump by a remarkable 15 to 20%. The potential is massive. The real trick is figuring out how to unlock it for everyone.
So, where does all this leave the Bridging Tomorrow project? Let's wrap up by looking at how they're moving forward. It's a story of resilience that honestly connects to a need that all of us are facing in today's world.
So instead of just giving up, that setback actually sparked a new and I think smarter strategy. The project is now all in on building powerful collaborations with leaders in this space, folks like MIT's RAISE initiative and the AI for Good Foundation, and they're also reaching out for support from big tech companies. They basically pivoted from asking for a single check to building a whole ecosystem of support. That's resilience.
And that really brings us to the key takeaway for all of us. AI isn't some far-off thing. It's here. It's in the apps our kids are using right now, and it's in the tools that are shaping their future. The story of Bridging Tomorrow isn't just about one startup. It's about the biggest question of our time. How are we going to make sure that every single child, no matter what their zip code is empowered to be a creator, not just a consumer, in this new age of AI?